Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about the solo campaign. If you want to know how to actually play a solo match, a wrestling match, there's another video in the link below. Right now we're going to go over the campaign part. The campaign is split up into 3 main chapters. There is a campaign player aid here that will help you navigate through the 3 chapters rules. And also there are some basic rules in each chapter that you can follow, and this is a good reminder to keep next to you. To set up the campaign, the major part of your campaign setup will be this campaign board. This changes from one chapter to another, but in a nutshell, what you want to do, you start off with certain abilities locked and elements that I'll describe. The first thing that you want to do when you start your campaign is find your wrestler profile card. In this case, I'm starting a campaign as Kurt Angle, and I put that card in its designated spot. There are also other components that you would need to cover. Your starting health, this measures the injuries and bumps that you take along the way. You start off with no tokens there. From a skills point of view and the actions point of view, what you start off is by locking certain actions. So you would lock the attack action here, and you would lock the promo action right here. And these two you cannot execute at the beginning of the game until you've unlocked them. The tournament mode here is specific to Chapter 2, and we'll go over it soon. Arrivals are also specific to Chapter 2. This is your face and heel track. And what you would want to do is put one of any cube that you have on the 0 spot to start your campaign. You start off with no victory points, and as such, you don't place anything here. Now, in Chapter 1 is very simple. You find Chapter 1 is only playable with Kurt Angle, Randy Savage, and the British Bulldog. It's an introductory campaign. I would really encourage you to start your first campaign with either the British Bulldog or with Kurt Angle, because they've been designed in a way to get a beginner to start the campaign. And Kurt Angle would be my suggestion to start with. I would and for anyone who any of the 3 wrestlers I mentioned and any future wrestlers that we might release expansions for in terms of Chapter 1, I would take these cards which say Chapter 1 Beginnings, and I would find the cards that have to do with Kurt Angle. I would organize them based on order, and I would try to find these cards that say Introduction 1 out of 3. You can read these cards without any spoilers, and then you'll notice at the bottom there's always this faded out box that you can use to read your instructions. So for example, if I was in part 1, I would proceed to a match against Mukundi Shumba, and after the match I would proceed to the post-match phase, then draw part 2. So this will tell you exactly what to do. Chapter 1 is linear, and by the end of Chapter 1, you will have elements where you've grown your character. By the end of Chapter 1, you might have accumulated certain points. Maybe you've accumulated 8 victory points, who knows, depending on how many matches you've won and you've lost. And you probably, by the end of Chapter 1, you would have made a choice of whether you're a baby face or a heel based on the scenarios that and the choices that you've made during the campaign. So let's assume that in this case, Kurt Angle decided to be a baby face, and he's on the tracker, the baby face tracker. He's on tracker number 1, or point number 1, or space number 1. That means that you would unlock a card, a level 1 babyface card. And these are additional that you see in the campaign. They might be different given that this is a prototype, but you'll find the level 1 cards. So in this case, there are 2 level 1 cards, and you would look at them, and you choose one of them, and that will become a permanent ability that you can use during your matches. So there's an advantage of advancing on this space because it allows you to build additional abilities and additional elements that will help you in your future matches. As you go along this babyface track during your campaign, you will get additional cards, And so, once you reach 4, you can draw an additional level 2 card, so you'll have 2 of these cards. And you can eventually reach to level 5, where you would have to discard one level 1 card and add a level 3 card. I'll stop here. All right, the other thing that might have happened by the end of chapter 1 is you might have gained these skills tokens. And we'll talk about this in a second and how you gain them. And the idea is, once you've accumulated enough skills tokens, so if you've accumulated 8, you can spend these 8 skills tokens to add additional abilities. In addition to the cards I described in a baby face, or if you're a baby face or a heel. And these they look like this. There are 7 of these, and they are represented here if you need to read a larger font. So for example, I can spend these 8 skill tokens, and I become unbreakable, and that adds 2 to my health, meaning Kurt Angle's health is usually 16. I actually start any match with health 18, and that will become my maximum health, and that's the unbreakable token that I can put on my player board or next to my player board. And this is a reminder to the player. I could add a lethal ability, which in this case, the one I would choose is +1 for grapples, or +1 for or +1 for throws, which basically means that if I play a throw, like I play a German suplex, let's assume a released German suplex usually does 3 damage. With this upgrade, it would do 4 damage. And this is not a one-time use. This is a permanent ability. It's extremely powerful. Any throw would do an additional damage to your opponent. There are obviously other abilities that you can see here on the board as well. The final thing I want to talk about before showing you how Chapter 2 works, which is the more complex chapter, is these bump icons. So during the campaign, you usually start a match with a maximum health. Let's assume it's 16 health if you don't have any upgrades. If you end a match with low health, anywhere here, you get 1 bump token. And that 1 bump token, you add it to your starting health. And this starting health section will tell you that if you have 1 bump token, you end the match with low health. And this bump token means that the next time you set up a match, instead of setting up at maximum health, you set up at maximum health -1. If you had 2 bump tokens, you'd start off as -2. And you'll notice here the guide will tell you that if you eventually get 3 bump tokens, you'd have to spend these 3 bump tokens automatically and draw a random injury card and place it on the board. In this case, you have a rib injury, and you need to start your matches not just with -1 health, but -3 stamina. And there are all kinds of injuries that you can draw accordingly. So a big theme of the campaign is not just upgrading your skill set, but how do I make sure I maintain a good health? Because if these injuries start piling up, you're in deep, deep trouble. At any point in the campaign, if you have 3 injuries, automatically, it's not even an option, you have to remove at least 1, so you draw down to 2 injuries. You cannot have more than 2 injuries, and you would lose victory points accordingly. In addition to that, at any point in time, if you wanted to remove these injuries, you can always do so and lose victory points accordingly. Even if you have no victory points, grab a pen and paper and note down the negative victory points that you currently have. So that's on starting health, and that's a big, big component of this game. All right, the final thing I want to mention is these victory points. So in order to win ATW, you got to complete all 3 chapters, or if you're playing as one of the characters who doesn't have Chapter 1, you got to finish Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 accordingly. But it's not just about completing them to win. You then tally up your victory points. Imagine you end the campaign with 48 points. You then go to our website. You can post your victory points, and then you can compare this to everyone who's doing so. And so there's this constant element of trying to better yourself accordingly. And now, how do you win victory points? This campaign card will explain how. You don't need to remember this. It tells you that in Chapter 1, if you win a match, you get 2 victory points. In Chapter 3, you get 3 victory points for every match won. And in Chapter 3, you get 4 victory points. And there are certain chapters like Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 where you lose victory points if you lose a match. There are also cards that you're going to be drawing that will tell you that you might gain additional victory points for doing something specific. I'll give you an example here without ruining the fun, but some of these cards might come up and tell you that if you hit 2, as an example, you can hit 2 German suplexes and 1 Olympic slam. And if you do so in Chapter 1, you gain additional points in addition to the 2 victory points. The other way you can increase your victory point attainment is by upping up the difficulty. Chapter 1's played on easy mode for most of the matches. If you decide to play it on medium or hard difficulty, you can earn additional victory points accordingly, and you can check that out in the manual. And just a disclaimer, this is not an exhaustive how to play video of the campaign. The campaign is massive. It has thousands of or hundreds of storylines, thousands of different outcomes that we're not going to be able to go over every time. But watching this video, I think, will explain some of the major rules and some of the major clarifications. We would really recommend you to go through the rule book on this. And in addition to that, if you have any questions, you can always post it on our Facebook group or email us, and we're more than willing to answer.